because your test on this is on Wednesday of next week. So I would like to have time for you to prepare for that test. It's a big test. So we've talked about this healing at Bethesda, and now we're going to look at what it means to us. Now, again, in the curriculum, I'm going to skip some stuff. I'm going to kind of change some stuff around a little bit, but the general meaning of the incident is that, well, first let's read the story, and then we'll get to that. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now, that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, and nothing worse may happen to you." Or that nothing worse may happen to you. The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." This is why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So we went through a bunch of this. This is where we are. That's not. Yeah, that's where we are. That's where we are. Okay, great. Excellent. So the meaning of this incident is that Christ reveals the grace and mercy of God. That's why this is. There we go. The meaning of this is it reveals the grace and mercy of God. Jesus didn't rebuke the man when he didn't say, "Yes, I want to be healed." He said, "I don't have anyone to help me." Jesus didn't say, "What do you mean you don't have anyone to help you?" That's not what I asked you. I asked you, "Do you want to be healed?" I didn't ask you, "Do you have somebody to help you get in the pool?" He revealed not only his power in this, he revealed his compassion and his deity, his compassion for the man, and his deity in the miracle. This man didn't need an angel to stir up the water. He just needed Jesus. That's all he needed. And so this story is recorded by John for the same reason every story in John is recorded, to show the deity of Christ. It's written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name. And so how do we see the deity of Christ in this story? Yeah.
And healing the man, then get up and walk.
Okay, so, well, he walked into the crowd. But the first one, you're exactly right. Only God can heal. That in that sense. Yeah, we have doctors that do great things and people end up being healed of awful diseases. But there's a scientific answer for that. There's no scientific answer for this. It's a healing. It's an all-powerful healing, and only God can do that. That's something only God can do. And so he says, take up your bed and walk. Jesus didn't only supply the healing, he supplied even the will and the strength to stand. We also see in this his authority over the Sabbath. He is Lord of the Sabbath. Only God is Lord of the Sabbath. This miracle occurred on the Sabbath, as you know, and as I told you yesterday, it had become a national fetish, if you will. They had become so tied up in silly, stupid, senseless, frivolous laws that that they didn't see the purpose of the Sabbath. And so I want to give you a word about the Sabbath here, because why did God institute the Sabbath in the first place? Right?
But they could rest and
Okay, so people would have an opportunity to rest, right? Think about this. Who is it that would have most needed that rest? No. When this was instituted.
Jews.
Yeah, the Jews, but who specifically? What? Not the Pharisees. No? What kind of a person would need rest more? What kind of a person today would need rest more? No?
Elderly.
Okay, you're getting closer. Think about the people. Listen, think about the people in their culture. Think about the people in our culture who work difficult, menial jobs. And back in that day, you had the wealthy who would have people under them, sometimes slaves, sometimes hired hands, who would do all the work while they sat around. So who is it that would need that rest? What? The servants. God instituted this out of his compassion for people that would be doing most of the work, and to prevent their overlords from mistreating them and forcing them to work 7 days a week. I don't know if you know anything about American history, but a little over 100 years ago, in the 1800s and into the 1900s, there was child labor. Poor kids didn't go to school; they went to work, and they did the work that was most dangerous in factories where they needed smaller people to go, and families weren't able to survive without their children working. And that's why our country passed child labor laws that outlaw that. Now, until you're 16, you can't work more than, I think it's something like 20 hours. And so this law, it was a law to protect those who were most at risk of being abused. That's the heart. And so he was protecting those who needed it. And the other part of that is that if there's 1 day of rest, what's assumed?
6 days of work.
6 days of work is assumed. So what the man really violated when he picked up his bed and walked wasn't the law of God or of Moses, but it was the formalistic tradition of men. It wasn't anything having to do with God. Those were man-made rules. Rules like a man couldn't wear a nailed shoe, a shoe with nails in it on the Sabbath. But if your shoe didn't have nails in it, wasn't made with nails, with tacks, you could wear that. I told you that a tailor couldn't wear a needle in his shirt. But if you weren't a tailor, you could. And just thousands and thousands of rules that were not only were they not made by God, they were made by man. But they had nothing to do with the purpose of the Sabbath in the first place. So here's what we learn about salvation in this. The salvation of the Jews, the word was do. Do this, do this, do this, and don't do that, and that, and that. And you can reach God. That's what every religion says, except Christianity. We work our way to God. Burden. What an unbearable burden. You never know if you've done enough. I don't want names. I don't want names. Please don't give me names. But have you ever had a teacher where you didn't know what was needed to do? You didn't know what the expectation was. You never knew when you turned in. They didn't give you any, like when I give you you probably haven't had writing assignments. Junior and senior, you'll have writing assignments. You'll get a very specific instructions of what I expect, and you'll get a rubric that tells you if you do all of these things, just like this, you'll get 100%. If you do none of these things, like this, you'll get it up, right? Know that those expectations. It's hard to live under that, right? To never know how you're doing. If you're doing enough. That's what it's like to live under any other religion except for Christianity. You have to do. The word in Christianity isn't do. What is done. It's already been done for us. Christ died for our sins. And there's nothing we need to. We're saved by grace. And that's all we need. So now let's look a little bit at the condition of the man. And this is the condition of the people more that were all around there, because it's going to say some things that aren't true about the man. And so the people at the pool were impotent. They were powerless. They were weak. That man could not do anything for himself. They were blind. They were blind there. This is a word that we don't use anymore. Actually, all of these are words we don't use anymore. But they were invalids. They were what we might call quadriplegics. In fact, when it says that he was lame, that probably meant his legs didn't work. But when it said he was withered, which is an old-time word as well, it probably means his hands. This man was probably a quadriplegic, is what we would call it now. Romans 8:3 says, "For God has done what the law, weakened by flesh, could not do." Jesus has done for us what we cannot do for ourselves. The law couldn't save. Why couldn't the law save? Okay, that's one possibility. What's another one? It wasn't intended to. It was intended to point to Jesus and to something else. But what else? Can you keep it? Nobody can keep it. You've all broken the law. And so the law depends on human ability to do something. And we don't have that ability, so we can't keep the law. So we have these people who are powerless and weak and blind and crippled and lame and withered. And I think this is a picture of people who are without Christ. This is me. This is all of us apart from Christ. We don't know Christ. Spiritually, we are powerless and weak and blind and lame and withered. It is only in Christ that we find true meaning and true strength and true hope. The people were also that were sitting around the pool were waiting. They were waiting for the water to be troubled. They were waiting for help to get down to the pool. And Israel was waiting for its Messiah for thousands of years. They had longed for Messiah. They were helpless and blind and waiting. And the weird thing is that when he came, they didn't recognize him. They didn't know he was Messiah. They did not recognize Jesus as Messiah. So all of this is a picture of Israel, helpless, lost, and waiting for Messiah. But it's also a picture of us if we don't know Jesus. And when he came to them, they didn't recognize him. I don't want that to be us. Looking for Messiah and not recognizing who he is. Looking for salvation and not recognizing the person that can give it. Christ, through his word and the preaching of the gospel, comes as a light shining in the darkness. But the world fails to recognize who he is. They're also needing help. The man couldn't get to the pool on his own. He needed help to get there. And we all need help. We can't keep the law. We need someone to help me. I'm a really good cook now. But when I was younger, I was not. And I remember wanting to make this soup. I was in college, and I was wanting to make this soup. And I had to cut an onion, and it said slice it thinly. Now, I'm much better with a knife now, but I'm not so I have always had good, now, but when I was younger, good gross motor movements. So I could shoot a basketball, I could hit a softball, I could throw, I could do all that, but fine was to this day, I'm not good. I fumble things, I don't have fine motor, I have very good fine motor skills, never have. And so I get this onion, and I start to cut it, and it says to, slice it very thinly, and I get like 3, maybe 4 big old slices on this onion, and I have no clue what to do. And I look at my mother, and I say, she comes over, and she would cut things in her hand, like she would cut an onion in her hand. She was amazing, an amazing cook. I couldn't do it. I needed help. That's the truth about all of us spiritually. We can't save ourselves. We need help. We can't. If we could keep the law perfectly, it would work. Now, the book is going to talk about what it calls the persecution. And it says that persecution actually came from the man who was healed. I think that's maybe a little harsh. We'll talk about it. But we get to this point where the man is asked, who healed you? And he says, I don't know. He didn't bother to ask his name. He just got off his bed and walked like he was told. He walked away. And then Jesus finds him in the temple and says, see, you're healed. Don't sin so nothing more will happen to you. Now, that may imply that some sort of sin led to his condition. We don't know for sure. But then he goes back and he says, hey, it was Jesus. Now, the curriculum is assuming that he was ticked off at Jesus, and maybe he was. Maybe he was ticked off because Jesus said, you better stop sinning because something else bad might happen to you, right? And he may have been ticked off about that. So he was ratting on Jesus. That's what the curriculum assumes, is that he was calling Jesus out, getting Jesus in trouble. And maybe he knew that the leadership was angry with Jesus and wanting to get back at him. But maybe he didn't. I don't think I think it's an over assumption to determine exactly what his motives were. It's possible that he knew exactly what he was doing. He was getting Jesus involved. We can't know what his heart is. But the Jewish leaders immediately become angry with Christ because he not only because he encouraged the man to violate the Sabbath, and not only because he himself violated the Sabbath, but also because of he threatened them. His power was threatening to them. So Jesus tells this man to take up his bed and walk, and this is what one theologian said. He said they meaning the Pharisees, the leaders, were straining at a point for a man carrying merchandise on the Sabbath was quite different from a sick man carrying his bed after being miraculously delivered from paralysis that had held him bedfast for many years. They had no pity in their hearts for him and for the multitude of people who lay in the porches by the pool. They were not interested in the man who possessed such great healing power. They wanted to know who would dare command someone to break their Sabbath. They didn't get it. They didn't get who Jesus was. They didn't get what he was doing. I don't want that to be us. I want us to understand exactly who Jesus is, so that we can bow. So that's the end of this lecture. We're going to do the quiz. We're going to do it together. It is short, and there are a couple of questions on there that I'll give you the answers to, but they don't really matter because they're not answers. They're not questions that aren't ever asked. So I locked off the essay. So this will be pretty quick. Just hang on. We're going to do this together, and you can get the answers. I can see that some of you are very tired today. I would suggest getting more sleep. I tend to not be a teacher that wakes you up. Natural consequences. Although there was one kid at Miller North that fell so fast asleep that he didn't hear the bell ring. And so I quietly had all the students walk out of the room, and when he did awake, he awakened to an empty classroom and was very concerned about that. So he didn't fall asleep. Near which of Jerusalem's 12 gates did this miracle occur? Yes, the sheep gate. Sheep gate. Now I'm going to give you these next two because I don't know if they were in the book or I skipped them in the lecture, but it doesn't matter because you won't see these again. But for those of you that must have the blanks filled in, then you want to write these down. What do the lame man's withered feet represent? Man's inability to go. Meaning we're unable to do or to go where we need to, spiritually speaking. And then the next, so man's inability to go. Basically, it's about our inability to save ourselves. And what do the lame man's withered hands represent? Man's inability to do. So basically, together, they represent our inability to save ourselves. And then the next one you do want to know, the next three you do want to know. What law did the Jewish rulers accuse Jesus of violating when he healed the lame man and told him to pick up his bed and walk? Yes.
Breaking the Sabbath.
Breaking the Sabbath. Or working on the Sabbath, something like that. Either one is fine. The name Bethesda means house of what? Mercy. House of mercy. B. According to tradition, the tradition of the pool, an angel periodically came down and D. Yeah, it's not drain the water or drink the water. It's bubble the water. Okay. Any questions? Okay, you've got a few minutes, but you know, it's Friday, so you can chat.
Yeah.